Hey everyone, welcome to the Building Excellence podcast. I've got Justin Games with me. He is the athletic trainer at Furman University, and so thanks for being on here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Like I said, it's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to kind of share my thoughts on some things, and hopefully you guys get a few good tidbits out of it, and um, really excited.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to have you on. I'm excited for the conversation. If you wouldn't mind, just kind of give us some background on yourself growing up, what that was like, and just some context behind that.
Yeah, so we were just kind of talking beforehand, and I think you know discussing mentors and my history and my family. You really need to start with my grandfather, and he's a really huge impact on my life. I'll brag on him a little bit just because his story to me is incredible. He was came from didn't come from much. He was one of 6 or 7 kids. Um, his joke was always you had to eat fast because sometimes you don't get to your second serving. So he was always a real quick eater. Um, but throughout his life, he had an incredible work ethic. Even though he didn't come from much, he was able to start school at Ohio State. Was then drafted. This is the middle of World War II. He was sent over to the Philippines, and this is where um, they were getting ready to invade Japan. And the casualty rate was 99%, invading Japan. And he, that's when Truman decided to drop the nuclear bomb. So he didn't have to go. So for the rest of his life, he always said, um, Harry Truman was my guardian angel. And I think that provided a lot of perspective for him, in terms of, hey, couldn't be here, you know, and that certainly rubbed off on me. So he came back, war ended, he came back, ended up playing football at the Miami of Ohio, and he played for. Now I know you're probably an SEC Big 12 guy, but he played for Woody Hayes, legendary coach of Ohio State. He played with Bo Schembechler, legendary coach at Michigan, as well as Ara Parsegian, the legendary coach of Notre Dame. And
Can you describe what are those schools again? I've never heard of those.
yeah, good one, good one. Do a quick Google search. You'll figure out what a real rivalry is about.
Okay.
It's a step above that Red River. But anyway,
Okay.
um, so he plays football at Miami. They go 12-0. They win the Sun Bowl, which can be argued as a national championship. He goes from there, starts working at GM. He then goes to MIT, gets a fellowship at MIT, where he writes a dissertation. It's called Compact Impact, which was the 1950s, was a dissertation on the impact of compact cars.
Really?
Um, so way ahead of his time, true visionary. He ends up being the uh, the director of, like the quality control position, sustainability, reliability for the entire Fisher Body plant and region for GM. Um, but what really resonates for me and why he's such a huge role model for me is that despite all of those successes, what he talks about most is his time in sports. He talks about Bo Schembechler, he talks about Woody Hayes, he talks about Eric Parsegian, he talks about all of these historical figures, historical coaches. Um, so when I'm growing up, I see this person, right? And he's at the upper echelon of GM, and he has all these amazing stories. Like, I wish he was still here to tell me all these stories he did, because they're all hilarious. He's got a real flat nose. He's broken it like 8 times. He played nose.
Oh wow, okay.
And so like one of those hog mollies, get down and dirty type guys, just like his story is. And despite all of those things, all he ever talked about was sports. All he ever talked about was how meaningful those guys were to him. And so when I'm growing up, he definitely, it wasn't like, hey, how are your grades? It's like, hey, how's football practice going? How's football practice going? He definitely valued that in my upbringing. So my upbringing was a lot of travel baseball, played football in high school, played travel soccer. I swam, played every time we saw each other, we played golf. Um, so that's a big part of me. Anytime that he came to town, he and my dad would play gin together. They'd play golf. So literally anytime we saw each other, it was strategy, competition, all of those things. Um, so essentially, you know, I had a great upbringing. I went to private school, went to private high school. My dad was the t-ball coach. He coached me for a lot of my life. Um, but it really centered a lot around athletics. That was my childhood. It was my dad. He for the longest time he ran a computer business that he just catered to individual home computers before the internet era. Nashville doesn't have an income tax. Dell moved in, so that was kind of the end of the computer business for him. So he did some logistics for a while, did some mortgages. Now he's retired. But my mom, she is more on the education side. She tutored for a long time. She taught for a while. Ended up working in publishing. Um, and published actually, a few books. I don't know if you Bobby Bowden's.
Called to coach.
Yes,
Yeah, really.
that one. She published that one. So she's had her hand in some of this stuff too. So basically, and Missy would laugh, at our rehearsal dinner. Everyone kind of just they talk about, what are the qualities of bride and groom, and they give your toast. And I think everyone stood up for me and said, Justin's most competitive person I ever met in my life. That's so that's me. So that's my upbringing. That's who I am. And I think a big part of that is why I got into athletic training. I played football in high school. We won a couple of straight championships, and I did have a pretty significant ankle injury at that time. This is one of those that black and blue all the way up the leg. And I remember our athletic trainer, his name was Bob Freesorger, and his, all athletic trainers have cool nicknames, I feel like. So we called him Freeze, and I remember just being really diligent. Like I wanted to get back so bad. Like this was in the off season, didn't want to miss any games. And he took me through the rehab process, and as bad as the ankle sprain was, I was back in a week, and I was like, wow, this is, it kind of opened my eyes to the things. And he had come from Florida. He was a GA under Spurrier, the Danny Warfel, the Ike Hilliard, that team. So, he had a good knowledge of athletics, obviously high level athletics. And that was kind of my intro to athletic training. I pretty much knew from the get-go that was something I wanted to do. I wanted to stay in sports. I wanted the competitive outlet. I wanted I didn't necessarily want the stress of coaching. But the melded health interest, the competition, the athletics, the team, you always hear these guys that retire, what do you miss the most about sports? It's always the guys, it's always the team, and I wanted that. That's what I wanted to do. And I feel like the athletic training room is like the barbershop. That's where like everyone that the jokes get told. That's where everyone's a little bit looser. I'm not a coach, so I'm kind of in the middle. I just it's always good for a big debate. Who's the greatest? Who's the GOAT? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
That type of stuff. So I love that. The water cooler talk. Like that's going into it, like some of the things that I thought I would really like about athletic training. I would say the reason that I love it the way I do are not the things that I thought I would like about it to begin with. Just the relationships and the people that I've come across and gotten to know and seen grow and develop. And played a role in some of that as well. Like that's the most rewarding part of it. But it's been a cool journey.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to get guys fired up, you just ask them who's better, LeBron or MJ,
Oh
and
yeah,
or Kobe. Kobe too. You can't
the
forget
one,
that.
yeah, the one that really gets it, especially because we have a couple athletes, different sports that come down here, and the one that really gets everybody fired up is what sport has the best athletes, and then everyone gets real, they start trying to fight for their sport, and yeah, those are some good ones.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, that debate, whatever it is, it never ends. Like it just keeps going to the
Yeah.
next day and the next day and the next day.
Yeah,
So
there's
yeah,
even
it
posts from Sports Center. I feel like on the monthly,
yeah. So you get to
debating in the comments.
you get to develop really good relationships with the guys for sure, hands down. You're in there. That's a great analogy of it being like the barbershop.
Yeah.
But let's go back kind of your story. You had these family members and you're involved in athletics your entire life. So how did you wind up? You went to college at University of Miami, Ohio, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So how did you wind up there? You said your grandpa went to school
Well,
there,
that's
played
my
football.
grandfather played football, so that was the family tie. And I think I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, but I'm Midwesterner. My whole family's from Detroit. Both sides of my family worked for GM. And I didn't want to stay in the South. I wanted to do something different. I was the only one from my high school that went back up there, and I chose there because obviously my family went there, and my connection to my grandfather. Um, he passed away right before I went to college, um, and that was a big part of it. I wanted to experience what my family experienced. Um, so it was an unconventional route for a Southerner. I mean, I feel like most people are wanting the Saturday football, the SEC. That's where most people went. I did have a few go to Furman from my high school. I went to a private high school. Um, so I went up to Miami, and yeah, it was great. It was the experience I needed. Met some phenomenal people. Got some exposure to some things that I probably necessarily wouldn't have gotten. I got to work with the number one hockey team in the nation. Like, I'm not going to get that anywhere else.
Yeah.
And then from there, I went to West Virginia. At that point, I was kind of thinking I wanted to do football, wanted to kind of get into the NFL. I'd done an internship for the Titans in 2008. Vince Young, Chris Johnston, that team. And then that was actually when I graduated from West Virginia, it was actually during the NFL lockout. So when I was trying to apply for jobs, um, those internships kind of weren't really available coming out. So I ended up just getting a job, and we moved to Chicago from there. My wife, architect, big architecture city, um, worked in a junior college right outside Chicago, um, which is a great experience. Totally different from anything I've ever seen. I come from I'd gone to private high schools my whole life, and then I go to Miami, and then I get West Virginia, and then I go to this junior college in Chicago. Totally different, and it's the best experience that I could have had because totally different demographic. Got to relate to people differently, and I think that's one of the biggest benefits of athletic training. Is got to be flexible. Got to relate to people on all levels, and that I wouldn't be who I am without that. It's just totally different, even totally different from Furman. Different
Sure.
athlete, person, different demographic. So it was good.
Yeah. Well, when you got to Miami, Ohio, did you already decide on athletic training? Because you talked about that experience in football, having that ankle injury. And sometimes I'm sure in the moment that was not something that you wanted to go through. I'm sure you wanted to be playing. You didn't want to have to be in the training room all the time. You're trying to get better. But at the same time, it exposed you to athletic training and obviously kind of altered a little bit of your trajectory into athletic training. So when you went to Miami, was that something on your radar already, or was
Yeah,
it?
that my major was predetermined. That's what I wanted to do. Now I can't say with 100% certainty that I was like, pedal to the metal from the very beginning. I did get an additional degree in exercise science. I was debating whether or not I wanted to go to PT school. Um, but again, I knew that I wanted to stay around sports, whether it was a physical therapist that is strictly with a team. Um, I did some clinic hours there, and which is more of like a general population demographic. And I just didn't like it as much. That's not why I wanted to get into it. So decided I wanted to kind of go the sports route. And I did that internship in 2008 with the Titans, which that's my hometown team. We were season ticket holders forever. Um, Kind of from that point, it was, this is it. This is it for me.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it was pretty immediate and pretty direct, I would say. And I know I'm not the norm in that front. It's certainly normal to, you know, people switch all the time. Just until you find your purpose. Um, you know, it could take a couple tries. I'm certainly lucky in that regard that, hey, this is what I want to do. And there's always been that direction for me.
yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about, your experience being around that hockey team, because some of the best in the nation. Because I'm not really super familiar with hockey, so I don't really know. But talk about just the leadership, because to have a high level team like that, what did you learn just being around in terms of leadership, in terms of uh,
Um,
just in general?
so it was, the Miami hockey team was sort of a sleeping giant, in my opinion. Their head coach, Rico Blasi, was an alum there, and they played in, it's a very similar story to what I feel like is going on here at Furman. They played in a very outdated arena, but it was, it was very small and super loud. And the environment there was unbelievable. I would put it next to any playoff hockey environment in the NHL. I really would. I mean, it was so loud in there. The facilities weren't great. The athletic training room was small, but they didn't lose there ever. And he called it the Brotherhood, is what he called their team. When he refers to the team, he calls it the Brotherhood. And that, that in my mind was so powerful, in terms of their connection as a unit. Like those guys they were as connected as you can be. And eventually they end up, because they were so successful, they built this huge arena, and it just changed, and it just continued to grow. Um, so the Brotherhood, that's what bonded them, and eventually they'd be getting all the, they're progressively better and better recruits. From that team, I think there were five or six that ended up playing in some capacity in the NHL. Didn't have long careers, but did play. Um, but I guarantee if you talk to those guys, they would all say, again, that those were the best. That was the best experience they had because of how close they were, and
Hmm.
that's always what makes good teams, is how they're bonded and um, how connected they are.
Yeah. Did you get to deal with football at all while you're at Miami, Ohio?
I did. That experience was not so much of a brotherhood.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the year that I worked for them. So this is right after my freshman year, was the year after Ben Roethlisberger graduated. Now he graduated, but he left. So they were a really strong team
Okay.
in the country. I think they had one loss. So he left. He went pro, and there was a coaching change. He left to go to Indiana. Coach Hepner. And then the offensive coordinator took the job at Miami, and just kind of really wasn't the same. So by the time I worked with them my senior year, I think they went 2-13, 2 and
Gotcha.
2-11. Um, and certainly a different experience from, the hockey one, and really really different from any other experience I had. I missed that off season because I was working with the Titans.
Hmm.
That was the year they started 10-0. Um, so it's definitely, black and white in terms of what can make good teams and what doesn't. You know,
Oh yeah.
um, Injuries kind of stack up when you get to that point, and just a lot of pressure in terms of pressure to win and pressure on injured players to get back. Um, Tough, but at the same time, it's good to see where it can be as opposed to where it is. In our current situation, we've had really successful seasons. Um, Gives you perspective in knowing that it's not always like that.
Absolutely. Well, and that's one of the things I'm excited to have you on because throughout your experiences, you get to work for the hockey team and see that type of environment and the brotherhood behind it. You might get to see a team that's struggling maybe a little bit from on the football team on that standpoint, but also you get to be around the Titans and West Virginia at Furman and seeing how it's grown at Furman, being a JUCO. There's just all these experiences that you've had at different levels with different leadership, and you get to see the ins and outs of how all these organizations are intertwined and what they believe and how they go about developing and building a culture. So you have that unique experience. But even in college, right there, you get to see some great teams at that time succeed, and then you get to see a little bit maybe of disappointment probably from their perspective, but you get to see what it looks like to struggle through a season, to grind through a season, or to really press into a season when it's all exciting and people are working towards a championship, really. So it's just a unique perspective that you have, even just in those college years for you. So
Right.
you transition out of college and you wind up getting an opportunity to go and was it a GA? Is that correct? Or
Yeah, I was a GA at West Virginia, and I actually worked the club sports there. So I got to work, and this was my first experience with. So I worked men's and women's rugby, I worked hockey, and I worked lacrosse. So you can imagine just with those sports, and the fact that it's a club sports changes things too, because they don't have the facilities and resources that necessarily a college athlete would have. So you get your weekend warriors that are playing that aren't necessarily can get conditioned or doing the things they should. So saw some really good injuries in that time, and that was a really good experience for me because you come out of undergrad and you just passed your BOC and now you're certified and it's time to apply all of your knowledge. Well, um, no better way than starting to see some injuries right away.
yeah,
So it's kind of a baptism by fire, but again, I wouldn't trade it for anything, um, because you just need to work through some of that to be confident in your skills, because you could easily get put into a situation that is life threatening, and you got to be able to respond. So um, that was another good experience for me as well.
yeah. What was the kind of the gnarliest injury you saw?
Uh, Without a doubt, the worst one I saw was this is a rugby match, excuse me,
Yeah.
and pouring rain, right? And I would say maybe a foot of rain, but doesn't matter. No lightning, we're playing. Okay, that's just rugby. All right. So I don't know if you have much experience with rugby, but you can't throw the ball forward. You got to throw it backward. So this guy is running towards the sideline, and he is trying to save this ball, and he's kind of running at a forward angle. So he steps, but he can't throw it forward, so he's got to pivot and throw it back. So he plants, and his foot gets stuck in this mud, and um, it hit. That's planted, and his body's going the other way. So I get over there, and his ankle looks okay, like he's clearly kind of put it to where it should be. And I'm like, "You're all right?" And he goes, "My leg's broken." And I was like, "Are you sure?" He's like, "Yeah, it's broken." So I go over to pick it up, and the thing just kind of flies. And at this point, he's he's laying there, and obviously that did not feel good. So I get a splint on it, and this is the day before he's supposed to leave for spring break. He's supposed to go to Panama City. He looks at me dead in the face. He's like, "I'm not canceling my trip. I'm going to Panama City now." and didn't shed a tear. Was just like stone faced, like, "I'm going." I'm like, okay, well, that's going to be your decision, but I need to get you an ambulance right now. So I splint him. He gets an ambulance. He goes and he ends up having emergency surgery. He did not end up going to to Panama City,
Poor guy.
but yeah, he ended up having a full tib fracture, ankle dislocation. Um, that's probably that one sticks out of my mind as the worst
Mm-hmm.
in terms of just ugly, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, there's a lot of, yeah, all those sports you talked about are pretty intense sports. So you have that experience. You wound up going to, were you thinking about getting the NFL actually? Because that was kind of the direction you wanted
yeah,
to
that
go in
was
the
my goal,
lockout.
the internship, and then kind of the lockout happened. So I just needed a job at that point. So got that job in Chicago, really just more so out of necessity. Since Missy was looking in the direction of bigger cities just for architecture, I was kind of applying there as well. Um, and then just nothing special about it. Just that's what came to me first, and took it. And we moved to Chicago, and we lived four blocks from Wrigley, which was amazing. Just it was a pain trying to find a parking spot, on game nights. But here in the you could hear the crowd, and you could hear the Go Cubs go when they win. And yeah, great vibe in that city for sure. That's a sports town. That's a sports town.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So at the junior college you were at, what sports were you handling?
So it always works a little bit different at those levels. There was myself and one other athletic trainer. We covered everything. And it was football, volleyball, both soccer's. It was a golf team, a wrestling team there was very strong. Um, so again, a lot of experience, a lot of people coming to your door, lot of, lot of people that form relationships with, and you have impact on, especially at that level. Um, so um, yeah, all of them to answer your question.
Yeah. And so for those that don't know, already just doing one or two sports or just one sport is a huge time commitment. So you go in and you're having to do all those sports. I mean, what was that like from a time perspective?
It definitely looks different. Um, when you have one or two sports, you can get more specific into your plan with each athlete. Like I was kind of addressing earlier, the assessment piece, some of the data that we have on each guys and addressing limitation and deficit. That assessment can't necessarily happen when you have that many sports. You're really more so triage. It's if someone has a significant injury in that setting, it's very hard when you have, let's say, 400 athletes. It's very hard to spend an hour and a half rehabbing somebody. When you have so many other commitments, you really have to you're kind of a first responder in those situations just because of sheer time. And um, we had our training room was two beds. Here at Furman, in this facility we have eight. And that's for much fewer athletes. So it's very different in terms of how you can help. But again, you're still those are still people you're seeing every day, and still people that you can make an impact on. And um, my biggest goal is I want to make sure that I want to promote health, you know, and you can still do that in those settings. Health is not just the hour you spend with me in treatment. It's not just, what you do in the weight room practice. It's 24/7. It's how you sleep, it's how you eat. So you can still make an impact in someone's life just promoting health. And that's my biggest goal. And that's my biggest focus in those settings um, is the education piece on um, basically giving someone the resources or teaching them how they can best pursue a healthy lifestyle, what's best for them. So despite the fact that the numbers are different, you can still have a voice.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you wound up from there moving to Furman, where you're currently at, correct?
Um, yes, yes. So that was shockingly 7 years ago. So we've been down here for now 7 seasons for basketball. So yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if you wouldn't mind, just describe kind of a day in day out type thing that you do with Furman.
Um, so my role is kind of changed. initially when we moved down here, I was basketball and tennis. I have sort of taken over some more administrative stuff, do the insurance side of of the billing and all that stuff. That's the boring piece. But um, I'm now specifically just working with basketball. So what a daily routine will look like for me. I'll typically get here at 8, and then in that window between 8 and 12 will be treatment time. Will be any individual needs that need to happen will come in that time. And currently we're lifting, so I'll see a lot of guys before after weights, getting them warmed up. Um, any specific injuries that need some maintenance, that happens in that time. On lighter days when I don't have really any injuries, I'll go up and watch weights. I want to see how they're moving. I want to see how, what can we work on. Um, Myself and I mentioned Matt Aldred earlier, our strength coach. We've been able to institute a lot of new technology. We use force plates here. We use Connexon, which I know got a lot of press in terms of the contact tracing, but they do have a performance system that tracks accelerations and jumps and loads and all that stuff. Um, so those are some things that also, I'll also look at that time. What are some areas that can improve, and those are always great numbers showing deficits. So we go back and forth. We have a great relationship on how to attack each day, what our plan is, what each guy needs. So that all happens in the morning, and then typically there'll be some sort of team workout, and then in which case, it'll be pre-practice prep, taping. Then they'll do some sort of film and then a practice afterward. I'll obviously cover that practice, watch that practice in depth, make sure there's no injury, make sure there's not any needs there, and then probably an additional treatment after practice if they need it. A lot of recovery, and then I'll go home, and that's the day.
Yeah, yeah. And that, right now you're in the off season, but during the season, one of the things I think people don't understand, as we were talking before, is the time demands that you guys put yourself in to make sure the athletes are healthy, that they're at peak performance, that they're getting back from injury, whatever that might be. And during the season, there's a ton of pressure to get those guys that are injured quickly recovered in a healthy way and the right way, but doing it as quick as possible to make sure that they're able to get back and play, because you only have that window of a couple months throughout the season, and you train for all the rest of the months throughout the year. So those are the peak time that you have to have guys at their optimum performance and really helping them excel to get to that point. So talk about a little bit about, is there pressure on you when throughout the season as you're trying to get guys healthy, the time constraints? What does pressure look like to you?
So I always joke with our football staff. It's, they get, in the way the football schedule is set up, is they really have, it's like, hey, let's get them ready for Saturday. They have one game. With basketball, you catch an injury at the wrong time, that person could miss three to five games easy. So I guess there is always timeline pressure. There's always the as quick as you can do it, you know. But I really think pressure is a privilege. You know, I I think that I have 17 players as well as a coaching staff, and I really view it as a privilege to be able to have their trust. They have their trust in me with the decisions that I'm making for the best benefit of their health. I really think that's a privilege. And if you look at it that way, it's really not a burden. You know what I mean? There's 350 Division I athletic trainers that work college basketball, and I'm one of them. You know, that's a pretty small number. So no, I don't think I feel pressure because I know that, obviously I don't want them hurt. I'm going to do everything I can to get them back. And they want to be back. So it's it's not it's not my fault. That sometimes some things you just can't prevent. You know what I mean? If someone gets punched in the face, it's like, yeah, it's gonna hurt.
Yeah.
There's gonna be a response there. Like, I can't stop that. So it's it's not, to me, it's not a burden. And I think, like I said, it's a privilege to be where I am. And I'm definitely grateful for that opportunity because, I think I'm lucky, to be in that situation that people come to me for this. I'm able to make an impact. I'm able to tell people about health and how to go about their day and how to recover. And I think that education process is something that will last them forever. So I don't necessarily ever feel that burden. I'm also a pretty laid back guy. So like, I'm not a big stressor, so a lot of coaches can be high strung and when it comes to that stuff. But in the reality is, if they have an injury, it's no one's fault, and I'll say this about, the coach I currently work with, Bob, he gives me 100% autonomy to, he trusts me unconditionally to whatever decision, he's going to go with, he knows that I have their best interest at heart. And at the end of the day, it's just a game. Like we're talking about a life, we're talking about a human body that I make the wrong decision, potentially it could have lasting impacts. So again, I want to win. Everyone wants to win, but at the end of the day, priority is always going to be health and safety. This is a person before a player.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that pressure is a privilege. That's such a great mindset to have. And any opportunity that comes your way, looking at it as a privilege rather than pressure or anxiety or whatever that might be. But you talked about how your current boss, Bob, Coach Ritchie, has given you complete trust. That only comes from you doing a good job for a period of time to gain trust. Like trust is not just given; it's earned, right? And so you're doing a good job throughout the process of the time that you've been at Furman. Obviously, throughout all the experiences that you've had, you've tried to do the best job you can. I want to get a little bit into. You talked about one of the core things that you want to do is promoting health. Like, how do people live a healthy lifestyle, and how do people implement health and not just maybe working out, but sleeping and eating and all these different facets of that?
Um, so I mean, it can start as basic as you want it to. There is you can get lost in the details of what good diet looks like. I mean, there's a million fad diets and there's a million different ways to go about things. But I think the thing to remember is there's going to be things that work for some people that don't always work for others. So even if it's just going and taking a 10-minute walk, my philosophy is always movement is medicine. I think with social media, and especially this quarantine, as much as we were sedentary, and I think a lot of issues can be solved with just moving, just getting outside. Like, we're inside more than ever. Just get outside and get some vitamin D, and um, I also think that it doesn't have to be, you need to work out for 90 minutes every day. I think if you just eat in moderation, I mean, obviously there's more detail to this. Um, a big topic of my reading is our food, what's in our food, um, and you can get we can talk about that forever, but just make good choices. It's obvious that a chicken salad is going to be better than Cheetos. You know what I mean? It can be real basic. So I think the takeaway is that you can really get lost in the details of how do you live a healthy lifestyle. And I think the important thing to remember is that it's different for everybody. But the one thing that I would recommend is just get outside and move. If it's 10-15 minutes outside on a walk on a 70-degree day, you're gonna feel good after that. Like that's all you need to start with. Obviously, it looks different for your elite athlete. Like, they're training, and their soreness and their recovery looks a lot different. We do a bunch of supplements. We do a bunch of stretching recovery. We got Normatec boots, and we've got an ice tank and all of the contrast bat and all that stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it's different for them because, and that's the value of having just one sport, is you can really get into that stuff. And I've got a lot of certifications in Graston. I've got one in Fat Tool. I do cupping. coming up here on a dry needling course, like all of that stuff to address soft tissue, um, is going to help. And that's not something obviously that's available to the common person. But my message to the common person is movement is medicine. Use it or lose it. You know, that's all. That's the only thing you got to remember. And then just make reasonable choices with with your food.
Yeah.
If I could say anything that, that's obviously very generic, but I think that also goes a long way.
Are you a fan of? Do you ever read or listen to Tim Grover at all?
I have not. Mm-mm.
No. Okay. He's a guy. He was the trainer for Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. And
Okay.
anyway, I was listening to a podcast by him, and he said, yeah, I got some simple advice, and this is just kind of a jokingly. He's like, if people want to lose weight, what they need to do is they need to work out and eat better.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, it sounds close, so cliche, but I mean, if you just remembered that, I think it goes a long way.
yeah, I mean, I'm speaking to myself too, but it
Yeah,
really is. I mean, it
yeah,
can be as simple as that. We know in some ways the things we need to do from
yeah,
a simple level, but the details we can get lost in, and it can prevent us
yeah.
from actually doing
Yeah,
the thing that we need to do.
I think it's a product of your environment. I think we're all products of our environment. If you just don't buy that stuff, you're not going to be tempted to eat it. But if you continue to keep the Diet Coke in the house, you're going to see it. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
just don't bring it in. And that's a great book, by the way. I don't know if you read Atomic Habits by James
Absolutely.
Clear. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of referencing that one there. But yeah, again, the social media environment and all of that stuff, the pandemic, we're as sedentary as ever been. So making an effort to change your environment and change your habits and all of those things, they can add up.
Yeah. And it's amazing something as simple as changing a habit where you have, stop putting Coke in the fridge on the second level where it's easy to grab. Something
Right.
as micro as that
Right.
can really expand from a macro
Yeah,
level as well.
disciplined people, if they see it every day, they're going to slip up here and there if it's there, if the environment is right. Um, they're just more disciplined in how they create their environment.
Yeah. We'll talk about sleep. How important is sleep?
You know, um, Myself and reference our strength coach Matt Aldred. We're sleep junkies. Him probably more so, especially than me. Um, but I'm sure you've seen the graphics. If a pharmaceutical some company said, "Hey, here's a drug that will improve your quality of life. You'll have more energy, and you'll feel better, and it's free," people would probably take it. Well, that's how I feel about sleep. You get an 8 hour sleep. That is the best thing you can have do for your recovery, in my opinion. That and hydration. Um, so a lot of times, especially college. Look, I was in college once, and I went to bed at 2 a.m. and we did those things. But if you're working out and you're going to bed at 2 a.m. and waking up for a 7 a.m. workout, your body's not regenerated. It's just not. Um, so again, and the quality of sleep matters. So are you on your phone at night? Are you watching Netflix till 2 a.m.? Are you one of these guys that falls asleep with the TV on? You know, and I think that's a mistake that we all make. Matt, for example, he puts his phone on airplane mode. No one can get to him. You know what I mean? No notifications, none of that. So I think all of those things are easy to do in order to ensure a night's sleep. Because if you're on your phone until 2 a.m., the depth of your sleep isn't going to be very good. You're not going to fall asleep as quickly. Maybe you're one of these people whose head starts spinning, can't turn their brain off. There's a lot of those people out there. So whatever your nighttime routine looks like, um, it's important. I sleep with a humidifier. We're all dehydrated when we wake up because we're not consuming food or water. So, that's something that I turn on every single night just to kind of help my hydration. So everyone's got their things, but I think it's the best recovery drug we got.
Hmm.
Better than
So,
a full supplement, anything.
yeah. So, would you say that is there a certain point where you get past, like, obviously sleeping for 20 hours is probably not the right deal, but is there a certain point, like, 8 hours is good, obviously, but if you look at statistics or anything, do you have any knowledge behind if you get to 10 hours or more, it kind of drops off?
Again, I think I think I'll defer back to what I said earlier, that I think it does look differently for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I think the important thing is quality of sleep. I wear a Fitbit. It tracks my sleep. What's your deep sleep? What's your light sleep? And how much time are you spending in those zones? Um, if you lay in bed for 8 hours but only have 10 minutes of deep sleep, right, your rest probably wasn't that good. So I think those are ways to track it. I think LeBron said he sleeps 10 hours. That's what works for him.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's sort of um, whatever works for you. I'm more of like a 6 to 7, but I think the average is about 8 for some people. It's different for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you're just kind of getting into it, 8 hours is probably the goal to start.
Sure, absolutely. We'll talk about hydration. I mean, how important is hydration and having water?
Yeah, so I mean, your body is predominantly water. Your muscle hydration, and really, all of your organs, if they're dehydrated, they're not going to function as well. So, especially when you get into this performance model, for basketball or football or whatever, if your tissues are not hydrated, they're not going to contract as well. And then you experience things like lightheadedness, passing out, like all that stuff can happen. Just your blood's not flowing as well. You're not getting as much oxygen to the tissues. There's a variety of consequences for not being hydrated, especially during performance. So that's number two to sleep, in my opinion. I mean, I would rather you drink water all day as opposed to eating whatever your calorie count is. 3 to 4,000 calories. I would rather you just drink water. I think you can survive on that. Obviously that's an extreme example, but
Sure.
um, you know, that's you can't perform without it. I mean, you won't be at max capacity. And that's just
Mm-hmm.
as simple as I can say it.
Yeah. So, I mean, is it similar to sleep where it kind of differs from person to person? Obviously, body weight and the size of the individual, but is there a certain amount of water intake that you should have on a daily basis?
Um, there's a lot of numbers thrown around, and again, I'll defer at whatever works for you. The
Mm-hmm.
guide is obviously the easiest, quickest guide is, what does your urine look like? Is it clear or is it yellow? What are you eating also? Like, if you're consuming a bunch of carbs, um, you're going to need to consume more water. I mean, obviously carbs are a very important energy source. But that water intake, I mean, there's also a recovery component to this. I mean, even when you're sick, right? They always push fluids, um, because you need to give your cells, your immune system, all the organs, the resources it needs to heal. It doesn't have the proper fuel, it can't work. And um, I think so. The average human, the average person, I would say, uh, defer on the side of more. You know, um, maybe I would say close to maybe over 100 ounces a day. It's going to be more for athletes. That needs to start. We give electrolytes. That just from what they're going to be doing from an exercise perspective, the sweat loss, the salt loss. We also supplement with the electrolyte with has magnesium, potassium, so they can retain water as well. Salt helps you retain water. Um, it's going to be much more for athletes, but I always say definitely start hydrating the night before, when you wake up, and definitely really start hydrating maybe 3-4 hours beforehand. It really should be a 24/7 thing. Um, we both know that that's not always the case. Just kind of life gets in the way, but um, the takeaway is just your urine. If your urine's yellow, you're not hydrated.
Yeah.
It'd be more clear.
Easy indicator right there.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. We all
yeah.
gotta go back, so.
Yeah, so obviously there's a lot of things right there you just talked about of living a healthy lifestyle. I just kind of want to pivot real quick and start talking a little bit about leadership because, like we talked about, you've been around a lot of different sports teams and organizations and cultures and seen a lot of different things. What are some things if you were to take away, like What does leadership mean to you?
So I'll go back on a story of my grandfather. Like I said, he held a lot of leadership positions in GM. Um, but I'll share a story about him from my freshman year at Miami. At this point, he had passed away, and I got a random email. It was an email, and it was from this guy who had worked for my grandfather. And my cousin also went to Miami. She's also an athletic trainer, and she was on this email too. And the email, he's like, "Hey, I would really like to have you guys over for dinner." And I'm a naive 18-year-old kid at this point. I'm like, yeah, gosh, I don't want to do it. I want to do this, whatever. But it's my grandfather. I knew my grandfather. Um, let's go over there. So we go over there, and he, we're all having dinner, and he essentially, what had happened was, um, GM was laying off employees, and my grandfather, essentially saved his job. And he told us that, um, essentially he saved my life. And he always valued me as a person as opposed to the production, because that plant getting shut down would have been, um, it would have been less work for my grandfather. But that's not how he wanted it. Like he valued the person over the production. Um, so leadership has all these different views and all these different definitions, and the ability to inspire someone towards a common goal. But to me, leadership is someone that, or a leader, and leadership is someone that values the person over performance, the person over the player. Um, so that's what I always think of is that example. What are your people saying about you as a leader? What type of legacy are you leaving? And at the time, I didn't appreciate the story. I didn't appreciate what I just said. But here this guy is, he's so thankful for everything that my grandfather did for him and a lot of people in the area. And that really resonates with me in terms of how I go about things. And that's one of the things I really love about Furman's program. Bob has he's Coach Ritchie has developed this Further the Man program, and essentially developing a player off the court is more important, and will develop in essence will help them as people in life, as also as basketball players. Person over performance. And if you look at how I go about things, like, it would be very easy for me to be like, all right, here's my starting five. Okay, these are the guys I need to focus on. These are the guys I'm gonna pour my effort into. Well, I try to make a very conscious effort. 1 through 17 doesn't matter who you are. Um, I'm going to do my best for you, for your performance, because um, all of that matters. That impact matters. That my advice to them in terms of their health, all of that matters, and will stick with them. And I still have people that and players that still call me for stuff. That I still talk to, because there's a trust there, and there's a relationship there. And I think that's what really speaks to what type of person you are, what type of leader you are. And I'm very much a lead by example guy. you know I want to be the model of health. That's it. So anything that I do will be in that direction. Everything is messaging. What I'm eating, what my routine is, how much I work out, all that stuff is noticed, especially for a healthcare professional. It can be, or I should say it is, a pet peeve of mine when you have a healthcare professional that doesn't necessarily take care of themselves. How can you take care of yourself if how can you take care of a team if you can't take care of yourself? So that's very much my philosophy, is person over the player, and lead by example. Someone's watching at all times. If I got a plate full of French fries, and and potato chips, people are going to notice that. That's just is what it is. Like everything you do is going to be noticed, especially when you're trying to promote health. So, um, very very proud of the relationship piece and how we go about it here. And yeah, just that's what I believe leadership is. There's a lot of ways to go about it, but um, catering to the individual is is the core.
Yeah. One of the things, there's a quote that, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I think that's can be so true in leadership where, looking back at your experiences and just being around you for the season I was, the guys love being around you, but you're also a great example for them. Like you talked about, you're trying to model those things that you ultimately want to impact in the guys within health and within just really relationships too, not just health. Um, and so, one of the things I want to touch on is you guys went through COVID this past season. You talked about routine. There's probably not a lot of routine in COVID that it's just shifted around, right? You've had to deal with a little bit of adversity where you're able to have somewhat of a routine, and then all of a sudden that's just kind of turned on its back. You just don't know what's going on one day to the next. How do you still, or how do people or yourself stay disciplined when you kind of have that routine shuffled around and you still need to maintain that health component of it, the leadership component? How do you stay focused and disciplined in that environment?
Um, so yeah, I think if you talk to any coach, I think if you talk to any athletic trainer this year, I think the one most notably I can think of is Dabo Sweeney. So he schedules his entire season out 13 months in advance. And COVID, you can do that. It's hour to hour, minute by minute. And so it had to be very flexible. And to be honest with you, routine is very tough. For me personally, I think it's easier for me to sink into routine during the season because there's a structured schedule. Hey, we're going to leave here, we're going to eat here, wake up at this time, breakfast at this time. There's routine there. So that certainly helps. What I'll say in regards to COVID is control the controllables, control what you can control. And that starts with preparation. That starts with, just being aware of the situation. Like I mentioned earlier, like getting a positive case, that can flip your day in a second. All of a sudden, like, you have a positive, and we were very fortunate this past season, we did not have a single case. But you get a positive, and now all of a sudden you got to contact trace this person, and now all of a sudden, hey, your five man's out, and so is your point guard. Hey, all right, coach, like they gotta go into quarantine, and you don't have them for tomorrow night's game. Go find a game plan. So routine was definitely very difficult during that time. But again, I'm doing the extra time that it took with COVID, and again, it's all perspective, right? I'm sitting here swabbing noses. I probably did over 1,000 tests this year. Not what I wanted to be doing, right? But there are definitely people that were affected a lot harder with COVID than I was. I was very fortunate to be, I still have a job. I'm still watching college basketball. I'm still working with a team. Um, so again, control what you can control because and I think I was very well prepared for that because I think, even before COVID, you get an injury during practice or you get an injury during a workout, like your day changes immediately. And you always have to be flexible. Like it's athletic training's always been a very fluid and dynamic work environment where no day is the same. And that's one of the things I love about it. Is that factor. So, I think we were all very well prepared. I think if you look across the board at how athletic trainers handled COVID, we all deserve a giant applause because I think we handled it pretty well. You know, um, it's a tough situation for a lot of people, but at the same time, I think we're all just there was a point where I was like, man, I just miss sports. I just miss watching practice. I just miss all. You're sitting there at home and there's nothing on. It's like, for me, someone that I watch sports at home. and I come to work and I watch sports. It's just like, man, what do I do with my time? I ended up building a giant playhouse in the back of my yard just to stay busy.
Yeah.
Um, but
For your kid, right?
yeah, definitely. Adult size. Anyway, yeah, it's very, very tough to keep routine. At the same time, I think we handle it really well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a tough situation to come upon, but it's just how you handle the adversity and move in. And going into that, like when you go through these experiences, one thing that's common is that you guys are on a common path and a common mission. You guys are working towards, winning a SoCon championship, succeeding not just on the court, but like you said, with Coach Richie and the Further the Man program, you're trying to help them succeed off the court as well. So you guys all have a common mission. And one thing I want to talk about, especially with you, is the word that comes to my mind is service. So we can talk about servant leadership, but as an athletic trainer, you are there for the guys, for the staff, for the organization as a whole. And talk about just like diving into, a common mission, working for something, striving for the same objective. And what does that look like for you and being more of a servant leader?
Um, yeah, I think that is the essence of athletic training. Everything that I do, all of this stuff, the force plates, the Connexon system, the CEU courses, all of the extra knowledge, the extra reading, reading research articles, all of that stuff. Yes, it enhances my knowledge, but all of that stuff is really for the players. All of that stuff is really to help them achieve their dream. And the most rewarding part of it is, for whatever reason, and I'll say him by name because I this is someone that you have experience with, Matt Rafferty. Okay, he and this guy for whatever reason had a tough run of injuries, and he ends up his senior year having a career year, going to play overseas. We were ranked that year. We beat Villanova. We beat Loyola Chicago, and it was on his back. And he missed his entire sophomore year. Had to have a couple surgeries, and it just is so gutting to watch him go through this stuff, right? And the most rewarding part, just speaking of servanthood, is I just remember during those times, like I wanted the best for him, and I wanted to work so hard to have him back. It was killing me to have him here. He's an incredible person, incredible human being, and that's just all I wanted. Everything that I do, I read, I find on social media, whatever. Um, it's all for the players, it's all for the program, and the driver is winning. I want to win too, but at the same time, the most rewarding part is when you have a player go through something like that, and at the end they're able to meet their potential. There's nothing like it. You feel like you just feel like job well done. Like a part of you did that, you know, and I'll remember him forever because of that situation and his trust in me. And it's so much more than just winning. That's affecting someone's life. We did this exercise. Coach Richie did this exercise called the 4 H's, and you go over the history, you go over the highlights, the hurts. Um, and he comes in and he's talking to the team. This is just an exercise to just get to know your teammates. Highlight of his life is not having back pain. You know, and I hear that, and it's like what I do is so much more than just wins. Like I've just affected his life by eliminating his back pain. Obviously, he puts a ton into it too. Like his work is certainly important in this, but a lot of it's my direction. And you think guys sitting here saying, "Hey, the highlight of my life is waking up and not having back pain." What's better than that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a great story. And one of the things about Raph, um, is we just talked specifically about him. There's many other guys you work with, but what were the things that he did that earned that respect from you?
Um, no complaints, never complained. It was there were moments when he was down, I'm sure. Um, it felt like we'd be doing therapy for 4 or 5 hours a day sometimes. Not a complainer. Hey, what's next? I'm going to be back. Always a positive attitude. Um, Strong face. If you know Raph, that's a strong face. Not a whole lot of emotion from him. Um, he had his moments of initial, disappointment, especially, re-injuring. Um, but he handled it. I mean, it's so amazing the way he handled it because it was, yeah, he handled like a champ. Strong face, what I would say.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I want to touch on because I was only around for a season with him, but when I think about Matt Rafferty, I think of like solid and steady. Like he's a leader by example. He's not gonna doesn't have to say a ton of words. Like he's gonna work hard every single day, and that type of person and a character like that helps earn respect. So and just in that he's also very competitive too. So it goes without saying that competition is really important to be competitive and to want to be the best that you can be each and every day for the common goal of the team, the organization that you're part of, whatever that means. And so that's critical. And obviously, it really goes back to your story as well because you're competitive, like you want to win, but you also want to help the organization as a whole. You want to help each player, you want to help the coaches, and you guys are on a common mission. And so, all of these things, as you do that over time, the relationships and the trust that's developed and established um, are the bonds that you talk about before with your grandpa and the stories. Like all these things, they matter. And it doesn't just matter about winning, but it also matters in life. People can look back and they have these relationships with people that they had, you know, 20, 40 years ago, and it means a lot to them. And, Raph, like it was just as simple as that back pain, like being able to help him through that and have that servant mentality that to really want that for him is pretty cool. And so that's a really cool story that you shared right there. Um, I want to kind of wind down a little bit on your time a little bit, but do you have any favorite resources about, the things that you're learning, books, podcasts, whatever it might be, or ways that you grow on a daily basis?
Yeah, I mentioned my season routine. I feel like think about this last night. During season, you have all the bus rides and all of those things. So a lot of my podcast time and a lot of my reading time, it happens in that time frame. And you got a couple kids running around. It makes it tough to kind of sink into a book. But um, the one I've been listening to recently is the podcast. I listen to Bulletproof Radio a lot. I don't know if you heard of that one. Um, Dave Asprey, and similar setup to this, interviews a lot of experts, and it's all health based. It can get really sciencey for all the science nerds out there, but that's the one that I've recently um, I've recently done the most. I do read. I'm currently reading Grain Brain, which is Dr. Perlmutter. It's another food source, what's in our foods type thing. Kind of going through that one. I got a few works. I got a few going. Currently reading Deep Work as a Team, which is it's kind of a book about how we focus and distraction social media and that's what I would say. I would say mostly reading books and podcasts here and there, but again, that's cyclical all during the season. So and a lot of times, especially in this industry, um, these conferences, there's a lot of athletic training conferences. We're all required to do CEUs as well. My goal has always been one extra certification a year, you know. Um, but a lot of it is just word of mouth. Like you get to these conferences, you're like, hey, check out this injury that I saw. Like this is what we did. This is what worked. Like all that stuff is more valuable in terms of how to handle something, how to handle a situation. In term, it's because athlete training is such a niche market that there's not a whole lot of information out there. Not a lot of people even really know what we do.
Yeah.
So when you get to talk to people in the industry, those are always that's always the best resource. But a few podcasts and books and Yeah, try to get them in when I can.
Yeah, but you're always trying to constantly learn and constantly grow. So,
Right.
one of the things as we go into this little fire round, I'll just say a word and you can finish it however you want to with this with one word or a sentence. So,
Okay.
preparation means
Um, preparation is separation is one that gets said around here a lot. If you go into a game prepared, the other team doesn't, you're already a step ahead. From my standpoint, being prepared for any sort of event, I mean, it can go really poorly if I'm not prepared. So just to be real short, concise, preparation is separation.
awesome. Love it. Favorite vacation spot?
Um, that I've been to or want to go.
Whatever you feel.
Yeah. So it's
Besides
always
Tulsa, Oklahoma.
yeah, yeah. Always had a thing for the lake. There's just a quiet about the lake. Anytime I get the opportunity to go, whether it's a friend's place or whatnot, um, that's 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 it. Now, if a dream vacation, I've always had this infatuation with Greek Roman mythology. The Colosseum. Love to go to Greece, Rome. Um, yeah, one day.
One day. Awesome. Focus is
um, so I think I was thinking about this one last night, and mostly just because I'm reading this book. But focus is deep work. That's it's just on my brain. The way that as distracted we are as a society, really making a deliberate effort to put that focus in, and putting in place an environment where you can really lock in on something. Um, that's gonna be where you make the most growth, is if you can get to that deep work, and that's something that is very hard in athletic training, especially as much as you get interrupted. And something that to be honest with you, is an area of improvement for me in terms of, and I think we could all probably improve in that area as well.
absolutely. Favorite athletic training experience? I know it's probably tough to boil it down to one, but
Yeah, I was trying to think about this one. There's so many stories, and so much barbershop talk, but um, I kind of touched on it earlier. Seeing that athlete getting back from where they were, the experience with Matt Rafferty, and but certainly hard to compete with knocking off two Final Four teams from the previous year on the last second dunk, and going into Villanova in a brand new renovated arena, and beating them. Like those are two definite highlights. But at the core of it, it's seeing people succeed and reach their goals. But yeah, I've been very fortunate, and it's been fun, especially my first year going 9-20, and now we're setting program records and wins. So um, it's been fun.
absolutely. It all comes down to
Um, it all comes down to habits for me. Your habits define you. What you do in the dark will come out in the light, and how you prepare. What's your structure? What's your routine? Um, we boil it down to basketball. If you're putting in the work, you're getting the shots up. When you get that wide open look, are you going to knock it down? Like, are you confident in your preparation? Are you confident in your habits? Um, is your diet right? Is your sleep right? How are you taking care of your body? Like, do your habits match your dreams?
love that. That's awesome. Yeah, so we're done with the fire round. And one of the questions I was thinking about, I just thought about just now actually, what's your favorite Fixer Upper episode?
Oh man, oh man, I would say all of them I watched with you, big guy.
There we go. There we go. that yeah.
Yeah, it's I still kept catching episode here and there, but I haven't watched as much as I did that year. That's for sure.
Yeah. So credit to you. I think the first time I ever watched a Fixer episode was on the road when we'd go on a road trip. You were my roommate, so we got to watch
Yeah,
a lot of HGTV that I'd never watched any before.
yeah.
And ultimately, I came back when I moved back to Tulsa, got a
There you
house,
go.
and did a little Fixer Upper episode. So
There you go. There you
uh,
go. Little inspiration for you. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, you were the key inspiration of making that all work. So anyway, is there a certain piece of best advice you've ever received?
Uh, yeah, I would say, and I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, is that a lot of times in athletic training, you got to be able to, in order to take care of other people, you got to take care of yourself. And this is one, is it the best? But it's definitely the one that has stuck with me the most. My father-in-law told me this one, and his advice to me was retire a little bit every day. And to me, that just means prioritize yourself too. It's very easy in athletic training to give. You know, you're a family man. You're trying to give so much to the program. You're trying to, you know, make everyone else great, right? Well, sometimes what can get lost, it can be at the expense of you. And you know, when he told me that, he gave me this old, it looks like it's been run over 100 times, but this old golf hole, and it's, you know, it's kind of like a semicircle, and it's got certain holes with certain point values, and it looks like it's 100 years old. But he gave it to me, and it's something I put in the garage. And you know, I'm a big, you know, I love to golf. That's just like the safe haven. You know, like that's, you're just outside, it's quiet. You know, you're with your thoughts, and it could be with your family, friends, whatever. And you know, I'll just hit some putts out there. And now, you know, because I do that, my son, you know, every single Saturday, Sunday morning is like, hey, let's go to the garage and play golf, you know. And it just reminds me of my grandfather. You know, we always play golf together. That's what my dad and I do. That's just, you know, that's our thing. And so when I see that, I think, hey, retire a little bit every day. Make sure you're taking care of yourself too. And it's been good for balance. Um, and yeah, that one stuck with me.
Yeah, that's a great one. Well, this podcast is called Building Excellence. What does building excellence mean to you?
Um, yeah, I think excellence can be defined a lot of ways. Um, Again, I would say, and I was thinking about this one last night too. I think it applies to me. This is a John Wooden quote, one of his, one of these Wooden books. He's got a million of them, but I'm sure you read a couple. Things work out best for those who make the best of how things work out. And you know, the way our workday can change, and a dynamic environment, and you just got to make the most of the situation. And COVID is a perfect example. Like, you know, we didn't necessarily expect to be the ones having to contact trace and doing all of these things for the safety of the team. But we did, and we made the most of it, you know, because as I mentioned before, you know, a lot of people were affected in a lot more ways. So making the best of the situation, to me, is excellence. A lot of that's tied to success, and just being consistent. You know, um, I think that's just a perfect quote for how to go about it.
Absolutely. Well, Justin, thanks so much for being on the show. Thanks for, serving all those guys you work with every single day, for the coaching staff. I know I was privileged to get to be around you in the short period of time that I did. And I just appreciate all that you do for all those guys. And thanks for sharing your stories and your knowledge and your wisdom and insight to us today. If someone wanted to reach out, well, actually, first and foremost, too, I do want to point out, because you do such a good job, you were most recently, you got an award for just being one of the best in the biz. So what exactly was that?
It was so I do mentor some students I've had the pleasure of. They've shadowed me for a couple years now, and this was an award given to, you know, just this is a Western Carolina award that's usually where the students come from, and they send them all over the place. And I was awarded a distance preceptor of the year just for, you know, the impact that I've been able to have on some of the students that have shadowed me, in particular my one this year who nominated me. And she did a great job. And I'm definitely involved in that role. Like I always say my first student, you know, was a little rough, but I've gotten much better at teaching, and you know, it's been a good experience for them. And yeah, it's definitely been valuable to have them here. It's been fun.
Yeah, well, I know it's been valuable for them as well, and it's such a well-deserved award. So it's just another way that you give back and serve other people. So, anyway, if someone wanted to reach out to you, learn more, or follow you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so my email address is justin.games@furman.edu. You can hit me there. I'm on social media as well. All of my tags are games over 23. Um, so you can find me there. All my profiles are public, so you can just add me and shoot me a message. So
Awesome. Thanks again, Justin. Appreciate
great.
it.
Thank you.